On these hills in this ancient city, our faith prospered throughout the world.
And tonight, through television, we can all come back. Hello, I'm Isabel Gauvery-LaGrosse.
And I'm Father Dave McAllen. Welcome to this first of a very special series of Reel-to-Reel in Italy. Recently, we had the opportunity to travel for 2 weeks through this country with our cameras visiting historical and religious sites.
And to meet the people who are the church, here where it all started. Tonight and for the next 2 weeks, Reel-to-Reel will take you to Rome and Florence for a fascinating look at our faith in the cities that contributed so much to it. In and around Rome, we'll meet people like Father Edward Petrucca, pastor of Santa Susanna, the only parish serving the large American community in Rome.
We'll also meet priests and seminarians from the Delaware Valley, living in Rome and studying at pontifical universities.
We'll travel outside Rome to Marymount, an international high school for girls run by an order of American nuns, the Religious of the Sacred Heart of Mary.
And we'll take a look at religious life inside the Beta, a seminary for delayed vocations to the priesthood.
It would be impossible to visit Italy without taking time to marvel at some of the artwork that made this country the focal point of the Renaissance.
We'll examine the life and times of Michelangelo when we travel to St. Peter's Basilica to see his most famous sculpture, the Pietà.
Then it's north to Florence to see his fourth and final Pietà. We'll take time to reflect upon the beauty of the Vatican, from the architectural perfection of St. Peter's Square
to the glittering beauty of the artwork surrounding the tomb of St. Peter.
We'll discover what it's like to study art in the eternal city of Rome when we visit with students at Temple University's Tyler School of Art.
In our final show on Easter night, Reel-to-Reel will join thousands of pilgrims from around the world who have traveled to Rome for a public audience with His Holiness Pope John Paul II.
While on tonight's show, we'll see the Holy Father, as the Bishop of Rome, visit a local parish to celebrate the Mass with his people.
Also in tonight's show, we'll go behind the scenes of Vatican Radio and the Vatican newspaper.
On tonight's show, we'll focus on communications in the church, and for that we brought along our special correspondent.
He's a veteran broadcaster and a friend of many of you, Monsignor Charles Meinall. Monsignor, welcome back to Rome and back to Reel-to-Reel.
Hello, Bill. Thanks, Father Dave. It's nice to be back on Reel-to-Reel, and especially nice to be back in Rome.
I imagine things have changed dramatically since you were first here with a camera crew.
They sure have. About 30 years ago, we did a film, and the technology of communications in those days was sophisticated, but nothing like it is today. And the same can be said, I think, of the church and communications. In those days, we're just beginning to understand the power of the media. And now, well, the very fact that we have a TV crew from Delaware Valley to bring you these programs from Italy says how far we have come. And then another idea is the quality of the people in the communications ministry. Just a year ago, a Philadelphia priest with an exciting career in the media was appointed to the outstanding post in leadership of communications here in the church in Rome.
One nice thing about being an archbishop in Rome is, I guess, that it can't go to your head because there are so many archbishops in Rome. There is a need, however, for English-speaking archbishops in Rome because there aren't that many of us.
And one of them is Archbishop John P. Foley, native of Sharon Hill and for many years editor of Philadelphia's The Catholic Standard and Times, before he was called to Rome in 1984 to serve Pope John Paul II as president of the Pontifical Commission for Social Communications, the highest-ranking communications position in the Church. On a hill above St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican Gardens, I talked with Archbishop Foley about his first year of living and working in the Eternal City.
Well, it's been very interesting, of course. One thing is that you come to an entirely different culture, but there's the great privilege of working with the Holy Father, of working with truly dedicated people, and of gaining a new insight, I guess you could say, into the universality of the Church and the working with and for people all over the world in behalf of the gospel.
What's it like working with the Pope? What is your sense of the man?
He's marvelous. One of the privileges I have as the head of a Vatican department is attending what could be called the Vatican cabinet meetings, which are held about every 2 months, I guess, with the heads of the departments. There are about 24 cardinals and archbishops present at those meetings. And there you see the Pope in action and hear what he says. And his insights, his zeal, his concern for the universal church are marvelous. So you see him there on an organizational level, just as you see him at the various ceremonies on a more personal level when he approaches young people, children, the sick, the elderly, and the same warmth, the same concern is present. Only in the case of the meetings, you can see it in the area of planning, I guess you could say, of strategy, of universal concern, not only for tomorrow, not only for next year, but for the ages. What will be best to serve the cause of Christ? And he has that vision and that insight, which I guess is a grace of the office, and in addition, a gift that the man has as a person.
You've worked with the Vatican before on several other projects, such as the Pope's visit to the United States. How does it feel to be the man at the center of things now?
That's difficult to say. I guess the light hasn't really dawned that I am the man at the center, if you want to put it that way. You always think, as with the Pope's trip or with the Synod of Bishops, that it will be over soon. It's hard to get accustomed to the realization that I've been assigned here and this is where I'll be working.
You taught every seminarian that attended St. Charles Borromeo Seminary from 1973 till 1984. Do you ever have any contact with these young men as they come over to study here in Rome?
15 of my former students are here in Rome, either studying or working. And that's a consolation. So that's nice right here in Rome to have so many people. I begin to feel like a grandfather with so many former students.
You are in a position right now of great responsibility and great prominence. But do you ever miss the days at the Catholic Standard and Time, the excitement of meeting the deadlines?
Well, of course, they were very pleasant. One of the newspapers in Philadelphia said, "What do you miss most?" And I said, "The view from the 9th floor at the Archdiocesan Office Building out the beautiful parkway and with the art museum in the distance." That was a beautiful spot, especially because my present office overlooks the alley where the Vatican trash trucks come in and out. So sometimes, for example, today, I was on the phone and we had to call a temporary halt to the conversation because a cement truck went by in the alley. So one could wish in that way that the office were a little higher, even without the view. But the idea of missing Philadelphia is there. I love the city of Philadelphia and the people, and they're very warm and responsive individuals. But of course the work here is very exciting, very challenging, very interesting, and the people with whom I work are wonderful, dedicated people.
We'll talk more with Archbishop Foley later in tonight's show about his important work on behalf of the Pope. But next, Father McGowan goes behind the scenes of one of the most influential newspapers in the world. Stay tuned.
The Palace Hotel would like to know, how far do you have to go to get away? The Palace Hotel, a world away in your own backyard. Weekend packages starting at just $39.50 per person.
Archbishop John Foley has had a distinguished career as the editor of the Catholic Standard and Times, which along with the Star Herald of Camden and the Monitor of Trenton, produces regular and accurate reports on the church in our area. But for the church in the whole English-speaking world, well, that work's done right here. The English language edition of L'Osservatore Romano is one of several published for the Universal Church. Others include the daily Italian edition and on a weekly basis French, Spanish, Portuguese, German, and a monthly Polish edition. Father Joseph Vadino, a Philadelphia priest, works on the staff of the English paper, which each week reaches more than 10,000 readers around the world. His main responsibilities and the function of L'Osservatore Romano is to translate the many speeches, homilies, and other public messages of Pope John Paul II in order to have a permanent record.
It's important for getting the Holy Father's message throughout the world. And it's important to let the world know that he is saying so much and what he is saying.
Is the print medium still an effective form of evangelization?
I would say it is, to this extent, that it is available to many people in a way that other means of communication are not available. For example, this program itself, this interview, I will not be able to see because I won't be home for it.
As the man who reads and translates everything the Holy Father says in public, I asked Father Vadino about his sense of the Pope.
I've gotten to learn him as an extremely deep person spiritually, an extremely human person as far as his feelings and understanding of all classes of peoples and all kinds of problems are concerned. Since the time of Christ, the world has grown tremendously, yet at the same token, the world has shrunk because of the speed of travel, the speed of communication. So the Holy Father has this responsibility to get the salvific message, to carry on the salvific mission of Christ throughout the whole world, to all peoples, and communications is vital. So it's most important that the Pope has these vehicles, these channels, by which he can reach the whole world quickly in the various languages.
The Church publishes one of the most influential newspapers in the world, and it also operates one of the most powerful and oldest of radio systems. Bell's standing by with that story just a few blocks from here.
You're right, Father. Vatican Radio is one of the oldest and largest radio systems in the world, built and designed by Giuliano Marconi, the man who invented the radio. A large radio station in the Delaware Valley broadcasts on 50,000 watts over several hundred miles in a single language.
Laudetur Jesus Christus, hier ist Radio Vatikan. Sie hören unsere
Vatican Radio covers every continent in the world using 37 languages and 150,000 watts on the AM frequency for Europe alone, in addition to FM and shortwave broadcasts.
Laudetur Jesus Christus. This is Vatican Radio.
Sean Patrick Lovett covers Europe with his broadcasts.
When you're broadcasting in 36, 37, 38 different languages to the whole world, then it's massive. It's the whole world. When you ask the first question that any communicator asks, who am I talking to? You're faced with any number of nationalities, cultures, ethnic backgrounds, etc. It becomes very difficult to broadcast any particular kind of programming.
Father Sean McCarthy broadcasts English language programs to Africa. I asked Father McCarthy how the mix of news, music, and religious information meets the goal of evangelization.
Well, for me, evangelization means preaching the gospel. And the gospel has many elements. A doctrine of God, a personal and social morality, and you could call it, in a general way, humanizing people. We can do indirect evangelization. In other words, for me, radio is an auxiliary to the direct evangelization. I'm not worried whether I'm talking specifically about a religious subject or a mundane subject or a secular subject. It's evangelizing.
In some parts of the world, Vatican Radio provides a special service.
Laudetur Jesus Christus. Niech będzie pochwalony Jezus Chrystus.
Vatican Radio in Eastern Bloc countries serves as an information source, but an information source in a very basic sense, information of a kind that they couldn't get anywhere else.
Vatican Radio is often called the voice of the Pope. Father McCarthy talked about listeners' reaction to the Holy Father.
When he talks, it doesn't matter what language he's talking in. They want to hear the Pope's voice. Some of our broadcasters, they're inclined to talk over the Pope's voice because he's talking in a foreign language. People write in and say, we want to hear the Pope's voice. We don't want to hear a commentary. We don't want to hear a translation. Let us hear his voice in any language.
The kind of audience, who actually is listening, again, how do you run a Gallup poll from the Philippines to North America to Australia, etc.? We base our assessments on letters, listeners' letters. And letters will come in from a school kid in Canada to a missionary who's sitting on a mountaintop somewhere in the Philippines. And this is his only contact with the center of the church.
This year, let Alitalia take you to Italy. On splendid wide-body planes, with flight attendants trained and eager to make you feel at home long before you get there. And if you're traveling to Italy on business, be sure to fly Alitalia's business class, because Alitalia put its business class up front, where first class used to be. So whether you're flying to Italy for business or pleasure, fly Alitalia. We'll make you feel at home.
Radio, broadcasting, newsprint, TV productions, these are the modern means the Church uses to teach the gospel. The skillful direction of these instruments has been placed in the hands of Archbishop John Foley at the Pontifical Commission for Social Communications. I asked Archbishop Foley about the work of his office and the duties of his international staff.
And then here in Rome, the idea is to make the workings of the Holy See as open as possible to the press so that they have access to the news in a timely manner so that it can be reported accurately and fairly, and so that there are individuals available to give background, to comment, to explain. One of the things, for example, that will be done very shortly is to have the Today Show on NBC telecast live from the Vatican all during Holy Week and Easter Monday, 12 hours of live programming from the Vatican, which is quite a challenge.
As the Pope's media advisor, what kind of restrictions must the Archbishop place on the Holy Father?
One of the chief restrictions, I think, would be to protect the Holy Father as a person. He's entitled to his privacy. And so many people want to have film of the Holy Father eating. They want to have film of where the Holy Father sleeps. They want to have film of his saying Mass in the morning. And if you said yes to all of these requests, then he would have absolutely no privacy whatsoever.
Another important function of the Commission is advising Vatican departments and congregations about the media, a sometimes difficult task.
And also we try to encourage the congregations to be as open as possible. Certainly some of the work of Roman congregations has to remain secret and confidential.
Here we see the Archbishop talking with the head of a Latin American bishops' conference.
But there are other areas, for example, in the release of documents, where I would hope that the congregations themselves, the various entities within the Church, could clarify the points which the Church itself wishes to make, so that these documents are not released to a world unprepared to receive them or to understand what the Church wants to say, because the documents can be 50, 60, or more pages long. And more people are going to read the news reports than are going to read the documents, certainly, even among the clergy. So that's one area where I hope that improvement can be made.
Why do you think commissions other offices are reluctant to do that? Just because of bad experience in the past? Or?
I don't think because of bad experience. I think because of a lack of awareness. The congregations are more scholarly in their approach. They're very balanced, they're very fair, they're very thorough, and they've constructed a document which is very carefully done, and they think that the document can stand on its own then, which it can, but it has to be interpreted, or at least it has to be indicated where the principal points are. And that's what they have to be encouraged to do.
The Vatican television operations also fall under the Archbishop's jurisdiction.
Just a year ago, there was established the Vatican TV Center, and just about 6 months ago I was named president of the board of directors. But what we want to do is what is done, for example, by the Vatican Press Office, L'Osservatore Romano, and Vatican Radio, to document in television, in TV tape, everything that the Holy Father says or does that is truly significant, so that there can be that record. And then also the center produces programs, some of which have been aired on television in a number of countries.
I asked him about future plans for evangelization.
And I think with the coming of the year 2000, and especially with the revolution in communications, the time has come to set a deadline and say, what are the aims of the Church? Where should we evangelize? How should we do it? How should we use the media most effectively in these critical years before the year 2000? And that we hope to discuss, and I hope we can have a plan for some worldwide effort at evangelization. The same perhaps could be said in some type of program of spiritual preparation for the year 2000, to make people in Rome and around the world return to that notion of first fervor, of true enthusiasm. The word enthusiasm means to be in God. And if individuals can truly have that consciousness of being in God, of God being with them, then it would be a wonderful transformation of the world. And that's what the Pope tries to achieve by his visits around the world and in Rome.
We are so used to the immediacy of the news media that we seldom think of the likelihood of a long delayed deadline like, say, 15 years. Teaching the gospel, however, is for now, and it is forever.
Pope John Paul II is a recognized master of communications in radio, TV, and the newsprint, but nothing matches the impact of his personal appearances. He's traveled over 250,000 miles to visit cities, towns, and hamlets to bring his message of love and peace to the people throughout the world. Today, in a different setting, he's coming as Bishop of Rome to his own people in a local parish to bring to them his love and concern. Our reel-to-reel crew has gathered this Sunday afternoon along with other press personnel at the Parish Church of the Assumption in a working-class neighborhood of Rome. The crowds assembled early in the afternoon in anticipation of the Holy Father's arrival. And those living in apartment complexes overlooking the parish added color to the neighborhood by hanging bedspreads and banners from their windows and balconies. We shared the excitement of the parishioners as the Holy Father arrived, waved, and entered the parish church. But our excitement was dwarfed by the response of a special segment of the Assumption Parish family, the children. When he finally reached the altar, the Holy Father, ever a teacher, quizzed the children on the purpose of his visit to the parish.
Una domenica in una parrocchia romana, la vostra, che costituisce una parte della Chiesa.
Using questions and answers in a very freewheeling classroom style, the Pope made it clear to his young and enthusiastic audience that besides being the sovereign of Vatican City and Supreme Pontiff of the Universal Church, he is in a most special way their personal bishop, for he is first and foremost the Bishop of Rome. The Holy Father shared with his little flock some of his experiences on his recent trip to Latin America.
Allora, mi invitano perché il Vescovo di Roma.
The excitement continued outside as the Holy Father processed to the temporary altar constructed in the parish yard as the day climaxed with the celebration of the Eucharist.
celebrare degnamente i santi misteri riconosciamo i nostri peccati.
Il Vangelo. Se lo faccio di mia iniziativa, ho diritto alla ricompensa, ma se non lo faccio di mia iniziativa, è un incarico che mi è stato affidato. Qual è dunque la mia ricompensa? Quella di predicare.
A pope who understands the power of the media, a radio network and a newspaper for the whole world. Monsignor Meinl was right. The church has come a long way.
We've seen how the media serves the church. Next week we'll travel the city to meet some people whose lives are dedicated to serving the church. People like Father Joseph Punderson of Trenton, Father Tom Mullen of Philadelphia, and seminarian Michael Ott of Camden, all living in Rome and studying at the Pontifical University for Americans.
And we'll take a look at daily life inside a seminary for delayed vocations known as the Beta. There we'll meet Philadelphian Al Norell, a former public school principal now studying for the priesthood in Rome.
We'll also visit the Church of Santa Susanna, which serves as the primary parish for Americans in Rome. Legend has it that visitors to Rome must throw 2 coins into the Trevi Fountain. One guarantees a happy return to Rome, and the other is to make a wish.
So it's in keeping with that legend that we're going to throw in our coins, because we'll be back here next week.
And our wish is that you will be too. Good night.
Good night, and remember, Jesus is Lord.